Hello everyone! So today I'm doing my top 5 books, and yes, I have dreads. Quick note about that, I had them for a couple days. Oh, cat's crying at me. Kitty! So I had them for a few days last semester, and I took them out for a friend's wedding, and so Mom wouldn't freak, and so yeah, I just missed them, and so I put them back in, and yes, they look frizzy and like a mess, but they're new, so that's what's to be expected for right now until they've matured and gotten better. Okay, so back to the books. Yeah, today I'm going to do my top favorite books, and I've got a good variety here of books that have kind of stayed my favorites over the years or have made a lasting impression on me in some way or another. And so I'm going to get right into that. So the first book I chose off my shelf is a book that I've been carrying with me since my sophomore year of high school when I read it the first time, and I've read it 2 more times since then. And it's just stayed one of my favorites, obviously, since I've read it so many times. It's probably the book I've read the most out of any book I have. But yeah, and every time I read it, I find something new and make some realization that I didn't make before, and that is George Orwell's Animal Farm. I love this story. The ending still just cuts me like a knife. The ending of the story still amazes me as it did the first time I read it. And hello, look at my kitty. You're so cool, kitty. Yes. And yeah, if you haven't read this book, it's about animals, and they take over a farm and make it their own and run it on their own without the humans. And it's just a really good story, and it has a really good lesson behind it, really good meaning behind it, and yeah, it's remained one of my favorites. The next book is a book that I just read actually this past summer for a primatology class I took, and it was really interesting, and I wasn't really into primatology, the study of primates, until I read this book and took this class. And yeah, it was a funny book. It was really exciting. It never really had a dull moment. Hi, kitty. Yes. And I highly recommend it to anyone who is interested in anthropology or primatology, or just wants to listen to a good adventure story, and that is A Primate's Memoir by Robert M. Sapolsky. But it's the story of a young grad student who is going out to Kenya during the 70s, I believe. Yeah, the 70s and the 80s, and studying a single family of baboons out in the savannah. And he travels to different countries. He meets other scientists who are out in the field studying other species of animals. He mingles with the locals. He mingles with the local tribes that are out in the savannas. And it's just a really interesting story, and about his journeys, his adventure. Put him in some dangerous situations. The ending is very emotional and telling of human nature, I guess. And this book really made me into a human hater for a while because of the ending. I won't say what happens, but yeah, it's just a really powerful story, and you get really attached to the baboons, a couple of baboons that he is studying, because he's named them all to help him keep track of them, and they've all got really distinct personalities. And so yeah, it's a really good story, and I'll probably eventually reread this someday because I just loved it. the author was hilarious. He was young when he did these adventures and journeys and went on these trips, and so he did a lot of really stupid, not very smart things that got him into sticky situations that were incredible. And so yeah, I recommend this one to anyone who's just looking for a good adventure story, because it's, I don't know, I felt like it was more about his adventures and the things that he went through while studying these baboons more than the actual research of the baboons. So the next book I have is a book that I read in like high school. I don't remember what year. Maybe junior year, I'm guessing. And I had seen the movie beforehand. It didn't sink into me until I read the book, and I ended up making like all kinds of like crazy like long notes and highlighting and like all kinds of stuff, tabs in this book when I originally read it, because I just thought it was the most like philosophical book I'd ever read in my entire life, and I wanted to like just live like this character. And I mean, not to the extent that he did, but it really spoke to me in a lot of ways, just like the emotional toils that the character goes through, and just like his philosophy and his realizations about how life should be lived. And so yeah, this has been one of my favorites, and it is Into the Wild by John Krakauer, I think. I don't know how to say it. The movie was pretty good. I own it. But I like the book better, just because you get to see more into the mind of the character and why he is taking this journey, and why he, I mean, in the movie you just think, oh, he's just like a rich brat who burned all of his money and abandoned his car and is living off the grid and, you know, goes out into the Alaskan wilderness and he's crazy. But in the book, you get to see more into his life when he was a child. You get to see more about the relationships that he makes along his way to Alaska and the thought process, because it's, there's excerpts from his diary. There's interviews with people that he met and made connections with on his way to Alaska, and it's more in depth about what happens to him and the exact details of what happens to him at the end. And yeah, and there's some great quotes from like Thoreau and just all kinds of different, you know, poets and philosophers and just all kinds of people that really, really go along with the lesson of this story. The realizations that he makes at the end of the story, main character, are really profound, and it kind of made me realize about how important life is and how much meaning you should give life. This is a really good book, really enjoyable, very entertaining, and yeah, very thought-provoking. I highly recommend this one. So the next two are YA books that I have read recently, actually very recently, actually over Christmas break, that I think will maybe replace some of the other YA books I have enjoyed over the years, and are definitely competing with some YA books that I thought were my all-time favorites. And it was really hard to pick the next two books because, like I said, they're competing with a lot of other books that I really, really love. But in the end, I decided to go with these two. So for the first one, I read it over Christmas break, so it's really fresh in my mind, and I loved this book, and I just can't remember the last time I was this, like, pumped to read, like, a series, and that is Obsidian by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Yeah, this is the first one, and it's the only one I've read. I don't know how the rest of the series is going to be. I've heard kind of mixed things on, like, the other books after this one. From some people I've heard that I think after the second book it gets kind of weird or something, but then I've heard other people's reviews on it and they loved it the whole way through. So, and I'm not really I like to think of myself as not being too hard of a critic on books and movies, but I love this one, so I think even if I hate the other books, I'm still gonna love this one. It was like one of the first books I ever just laughed out loud to. I've never just, like, couldn't contain myself. I got so many dirty looks from my mom because I was like, I'd like just burst out laughing and uncontrollably, and she'd be like, "What are you laughing at?" And I'm like, nothing, and I just keep reading. For those of you who don't know what this series is about, it's about a teenage girl who is living in West Virginia in this small little town, and it's just her and her mother, and she lives next door to this really weird brother and sister, and the brother is a total jerk to her, and she's really rude, and just kind of like always like getting at her, you know, and things happen and she discovers their true identity. That's all I'm gonna say. The main guy is, he's just, whew, you don't know, man. I mean, well, you can see him on the model on the cover. He's pretty. So the last book I also read over Christmas break, and I chose it over some others because it was so sweet. It was so warm and fuzzy and adorable and wonderful and every other nice word. And I think it's a very highly underrated book. I've only seen a few people online who have read it. And I keep recommending it to my friends, and no one's read it yet, and I'm like, guys, read it so we can talk about it. So I'm going with My Life Next Door by Huntley Fitzpatrick. It's one of the first contemporary books I've read, so it was a little different. I'm used to doing like YA fantasy and dystopian and stuff like that, supernatural. So it was one of the first contemporary books I've read, and I loved it. It was, like I said, it was so sweet. The main guy is so adorable, so lovable. You really don't have a hard time loving him instantly. And I highly recommend it to anyone who's just looking for a good contemporary read. It took me like no time at all to read this book, because it's just a page turner. It really is. It goes by so fast, and you don't want to put it down. And it was just a well thought out, well written story. So I hope you enjoyed that video. And yeah, if you have anything to say, recommendations for me, or you also liked one of these books, let me know. Give me your thoughts, give me your recommendations, your 2 cents, all of that. And hope you enjoyed. Bye!